This episode is brought to you by Meow Wolf. Come creative, leave creative. October is the Cosmic Howl at Meow Wolf Denver. Take our immersive experience and add a splash of strange enchantment with events, workshops, and other special surprises. Get your ghoul on with events like Adultiverse, where the wild things roam, only for the grownly on October 16th. Costumes are encouraged. Must be 21 or older. Learn more at meowwolf.com/cosmic-howl. That's meowwolf.com/cosmic-howl.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hey Denver, it's Paul. I'm a producer on the show, and I'm in your feed this weekend with a bonus episode. What you are about to hear is the recording of a forum that we moderated with the candidates running to represent RTD District A, which covers Central and Southeast Denver. Thanks so much to the Denver Press Club for organizing this, inviting us, and to the folks at the Buell Public Media Center for hosting, and I hope you all enjoy it. One more thing before you get started. I did check this, and it's going to make sense in a few minutes, but I confirmed that RTD, in fact, is going to be the agency responsible for running the Colfax BRT once it's built.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is great. This is a great turnout. We know the city cares about transit. Well, we know the people in the city care about transit. Maybe I should be a little more clear about that. And that's why we're all here today. I'm Bree Davies. I'm the host of CityCast Denver, and I'm here with my producer,
Paul Caroli, executive producer of CityCast Denver. We are so excited to see you all today. We've never done this before. I know a lot of the candidates, for them it's first time as well. So, bear with us as we figure this out. But we think it's going to be fun, and we hope everybody comes away learning something.
So we're here to talk about RTD. It's an agency that doesn't have a great reputation all the time for being usable or reliable, but that doesn't mean a lot of people in the city don't rely on it every single day. And I think that's all why we're here.
Before you sit 3 candidates running for a spot on RTD's board of directors, a 15-member body that sets the vision for the agency and oversees its leadership. This is the race for District A, which covers Central and Southeast Denver, one of Denver's most transit-reliant areas, from downtown all the way to the border with Aurora.
So how this is going to work is we're going to give each of our 3 candidates the chance to make an opening statement, and then we'll ask each of them a few questions with opportunities for rebuttal from the other folks on the panel, and then we'll have a chance for you all in the audience to ask some questions, but please hold those until the end. And then you're going to hear closing statements from each of the candidates, and we're going to have some time afterward if you want to hang around and chat.
With that, let me introduce our candidates. Starting from the left, Chris Nicholson is a political technologist, a proud urbanist, and one of the leaders of YIMBY Denver. Maybe a round of applause. Thank you. In the middle, we have Bob Diniger, a longtime transit advocate who rode the Q31 bus in Queens to high school every day, drove RTD buses in Denver for 4 years, and was president of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1772. And on the far end, Kyle Bruner is a data scientist, researcher, partner, and dad who's focused on ensuring our regional transportation district is a meaningful part of our climate future.
Okay, pop quiz, hot shots. We're going to start with a pop quiz. We just want you to raise your hand if you know the answer. What does a standard RTD day pass cost?
Chris, you want to go ahead?
$5.50.
That's correct. Yeah.
I like that.
Thank
I like
you.
the clapping after. This is now a game show. I think that's probably how it's supposed to work.
Next question. We'll get to your opening statements in a segment.
Oh, yeah, God, I skipped the whole... I didn't even follow the script, Paul.
That's
okay,
all right.
Right, we'll get through
Pop
that.
quiz
Okay,
is important, too.
This is the warm-up section.
What does a monthly pass cost? Bob, you want to take that one?
I pay $29.
Bob pays $29.
All right, I wrote down $88. Maybe that's some kind of special.
You
Chris,
got the
wanna-
RTD hookup or what, Bob?
He gets the senior discount.
There you go, Bob.
Ah.
How about
That's
this
fair.
one? Let's call this one our last pop quiz question. How much would it cost to take an Accessoride to the airport? That's our toughest question.
An arm and a leg.
I guess it
Arm and a leg. Guess we'll talk about that later. Kyle, do you want to?
depends where you're coming from. Isn't it Accessoride, the flat fee plus? No, I'm sorry, that's on demand.
$19.
$19.
$19 is for,
$19.
yes, regular old
There
Accessoride.
you go.
So we got to know each other a little bit. We know how much things cost. Some of us do. Let's do some opening statements here. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. My name is Chris Nicholson. I am a full-time Art Transit rider, the only one running for the RTD board this year. I know what it's like to use RTD. I've been stranded by RTD buses. I've been late to meetings. I've been harassed on the buses by passengers. And I got into this race because I believe we can do better. I worked over the last year to get to know the candidates from across the region running for RTD and built a coalition that put together a joint plan to address RTD's most critical problems, the quality, reliability, and safety of the service. We put out our commitment to riders that you can read at fixrtd.com. I'm the son of a single mom. I grew up in the suburbs. I studied politics and technology throughout high school and college, and then went on to work in the industry at the intersection of both of them. In my spare time, I worked on policy initiatives. Once I'd moved to Colorado, I helped pass an initiative in Boulder that expanded youth turnout in their elections. And here in Denver, was one of the champions of a bill that increased access to PrEP to reduce HIV infections. I'm one of the leaders of YIMBY Denver and have spent the last decade of my life focused intently on increasing housing production and housing affordability, both here in Colorado and around the country. One of my, I think the biggest challenges RTD faces right now is that while 90% of the people in the region are car owners, and almost all of those people pay sales tax to fund RTD, nearly a majority of them never even consider using it. We need to get RTD to a point where the average person sees it as part of their transit journey. Because any public service that only has a small minority of people interested in it is never going to be something that offers the kind of quality that we all want from RTD. I'm running with the support of a wide array of Colorado leaders and organizations: Denver Mayor Mike Johnston, State Senator Chris Hansen, the RTD Transit Workers Union, ATU 1001, SEIU Local 105, Colorado Black Women for Political Action, YIMBY Denver, Denver State Representatives Mabry, Woodrow, Hernandez, and Valdez, Council Members Watson, Alvidrez, Hines, Parody, and many others have endorsed me because they see my commitment to transit quality, safety, reliability, and equity up close. There's a gap in our society between the people who have access and those who don't. Access to housing, good schools, safe streets, healthy food, and access to the world around us. If you can't afford a car or can't drive, transit offers a bridge between isolation and opportunity. Today, I posted and announced my sustainability plan. I'm proud to be the first candidate in this race to do so. You can read it at chrisforrtd.com/climate. I've vetted the plan with multiple Colorado climate and transportation experts. Our planet is warming, and the climate vibes my opponents offer are not simply enough. We need concrete solutions. I'm running because I believe in servant leadership. I believe you have to show up and you have to be there for people. My number is 303-335-9728. My email address is chris@chrisforrtd.com. And I'm offering right now, as I've offered throughout the last year, that I want to be someone who's there for you when you have an issue with RTD. I want you to call me, I want you to email me, and I will do everything I can to address it. My name is Chris Nicholson. I'm ready to fix RTD, and I'm asking for your vote.
Chris, that was a little longer than our agreed 3 minutes. I did not say that earlier, but I'm going to be tougher on you all going forward. 2 minutes for answers later, 3 minutes for opening statements. Bob, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'll try to stay under the 3 minutes. I got 3 pages. How's that?
3 minutes.
Thanks for your interest. As the organizers know, I chose not to participate in this forum at its original venue. I want to thank Julie Riskin and Jamie Lewis from Colorado Cross Disability Coalition for intervening and making my presence here possible. Disability rights are civil rights. I also want to thank the Denver Press Club for hosting and doing the right thing. Kudos to Bree and Paul with CityCast for their always stellar work. Let me provide a little contrast for you. I'm an alternative to the status quo. I'm Bob Diniger. I'm willing to be a pain in the ass if the situation calls for it. As a former RTD bus driver, union local president, and transit advocate, I've been doing this work for years. Call it good trouble. I'm the only candidate in District A with direct experience of RTD's operations, security, management, and governance. I am not a professional politician. One glimpse at my campaign's bank balance, and you'll see that. I started paying close attention to RTD's board in early 2020 because my life literally depended on it. I had passengers coughing as they stood within inches of my face. No one wore masks. The very real fear of being exposed to a deadly virus became part of my workday. The agency was slow to respond, the board was also, and I got angry. Still am, actually. We never did see any hazard pay. I forged a bond in the fire of the pandemic with 2 people who shared my sense of urgency, Yvette Trujillo and Chantel Lewis. Yvette remains the first and only woman to serve as president of RTD's ATU Local 1001. Chantel braved dirty politics while running for the RTD board and endured racist treatment, fighting for workers' rights while on it. Chantel continues to inspire as a Denver City Councilor, and Yvette has risen to the number 2 position at ATU International in Washington, D.C. I'm proud that both women are my friends. Speaking of a sense of urgency, that's what I see as missing on RTD and its board. Again, I'm Bob Diniger. I'm willing to be a pain in the ass if the situation calls for it. The EPA has cited Denver every year for unhealthy air. If that isn't a climate emergency, what is? Air quality health concerns in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and other lower income neighborhoods threaten children's lives every day. RTD's failure to seriously reduce vehicle miles traveled on our streets and highways is a matter of life and death. RTD has to become a viable alternative to driving. When RTD trip times are competitive with drive times, ridership will increase along with our sense of safety, and we'll enjoy great public transit again. I'm Bob Diniger, you know the rest.
Kyle, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, my name is Kyle Brunner, and I'm running for RTD to ensure it's a meaningful part of our climate future. Most of my adult life, I've worked for progressive causes, leaders like Bernie Sanders, Governor Polis, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Defenders of Wildlife, labor unions, and the state of Colorado's pandemic vaccine equity access program, to name a few. I feel honored to give back to my community, and I enjoy solving challenging problems. One challenge rises above all others. Combating climate change is critical to ensuring we have a habitable planet with clean air, land, and water. I grew up with transit, environmentalism, and social equity as core values. I come from surgeons for the railroad, nurses, Democratic politicians, and wildlife conservationists, a father in groundwater remediation, and a mother with a background in social work. These values led me to a rewarding professional career of giving back. Right now, I'm a data scientist, building cybersecurity and federal budgeting software using AI to save taxpayers money and keep us safe. Before getting a master's in data science, I was a field organizer, campaign manager, and finally a public opinion researcher, recording and analyzing the needs of communities and improving lives by electing progressive officials and changing policy at every level of government, including improving transit, building transit-oriented communities, and protecting our environment. I've also spent time in the bureaucratic trenches as an employee, contractor, intern, and volunteer. In all 3, branches of government at the state and federal levels. But most importantly, I'm a partner and a husband who loves being a plus one to an amazing leader for the state of Colorado. And finally, I'm a dad who wants to teach his son about what it means to be part of a community. I've worked with several transit agencies and transit-oriented communities, helping them conduct research, build coalitions, and execute strategic plans. Using that experiences and your support for the RTD board, here are the key things I plan to do. To meet our climate goals, we need to focus on improving ridership through rapid, frequent, and reliable service with a comfortable experience. Improving transit services in the Denver metro area by making it a consistent and comfortable choice. We can save people time, money, and improve our health. Once RTD has built back the trust of the community and improved ridership, we need to focus on creating a strategic regional transit and development plan with the lens on ensuring social equity, economic growth, and a better climate future through connected communities. All the while collaborating with advocates, federal, state, and local governments, and the business community. A plan could include finishing existing projects, expanding service, and building the transit system and transit-oriented communities to sustain the growth of our community for decades to come. My name is Kyle, it rhymes with mile, and I am asking for your vote on November 5th for RTD District A. I would be honored if voters gave me the opportunity to take action and ensure RTD takes a leadership role in improving our climate. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. Thank you all. Let's get into the good stuff here. So you all may be here because this is a very unique election for RTD's board of directors. Normally, these races are not so interesting and headline grabbing, but this one's unique because these three are competing for a seat on the board. But earlier this year, the debate was whether or not this election should be happening at all. The governor attempted to reform this body in a way that would have eliminated this race entirely. So that's our first question for each of you. You're going to have 2 minutes to respond. This is not why are you the right person for this job, but why does this job need to exist? Kyle, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So elected versus appointed boards. I've worked with both in the transit space, elected boards and appointed boards, and both can be effective, right? We can have well-vetted, technical, professional appointed boards where people are hired because of their skills and their dedication to making a public service better for the community. We can also have elected boards with competition that increases the quality of individuals with better experience that you're going to get solving challenges for the public. And when it comes to RTD, I believe both could work. This is about really doing what's best for the community and ensuring that we have a transit system that is going to meet the goals of the community, grow with the community, and also ensure that we have a better climate future. And I think that we need to assess and investigate the best path forward for RTD and transit here in our state.
Okay, Bob, how about you? Why does the RTD board need to exist?
Well, we had something couple 100+ years ago up in Boston called the Tea Party. It was the original Tea Party, and the slogan there, if I remember correctly, I'm not that old, I read it in a history book, was taxation without representation is tyranny. And we're all paying for RTD. So we need to have a voice. I was part of the transit town hall that was held on tax day back in April. I opposed the Transit Reform Act. I do believe that we have an opportunity to be a global leader with RTD. RTD has fallen on some slack times, shall we say. There's a book called Light Rail and Heavy Politics that talks about the history of RTD and how at the outset it had an appointed board. And boy, the corruption was rampant. The board voted to allow the chair of the board to receive an RV from the contractor for the 16th Street Mall. Why does that sound familiar? We've got a wonderful setup here. You can get all the way to anywhere from most streets in Denver, street corners in Denver. The train to the plane. It's a marvelous setup. It's just not efficient. We need to fix it.
Thank you, Bob. Chris, how about you?
We need an elected board because it allows us to be more dynamic and more representative. Appointed boards often take a longer time to correct for mistakes. We saw that with the original issue that prompted the elected board, which was access for individuals with disabilities, that the appointed board would not take action, and the elected board came in and did. When the bill that came up this year threatened the board, Bob, to his immense credit, stepped up and got involved and was very vocal and very active. And I, alongside him, did the same thing, spoke up, got engaged, worked with legislators, and killed a bill that would have gutted representation. We have 4 districts right now that are majority minority. The result of that bill would have been 0 districts that are majority minority. We need more diverse representation on the board of RTD, not less. But the thing that struck me about that is that when all this was going on, Kyle was nowhere to be seen. He hasn't been involved in a transit issue until he decided to get into this race. So for him to be talking about, appointed versus elected, and he can't choose between one or the other, I think what matters here is when RTD is threatened, when the voters' rights are threatened, you should show up. You should demonstrate that you care, before you decide to run for something like this. You've been around for a while. I've been around for a while, and I'd never met you until you decided to run. And I think that's kind of questionable, to be honest.
Just want to remind everyone to silence their cell phones. Thank you. Bree?
Well, we're going to jump off of something that you just said, Chris. I'm going to ask you all some different questions related to the Governor Polis's relationship to this whole situation. And Chris, it seems like you may have already made enemies with the governor in some capacity when you led this charge against his effort to reform RTD earlier this year. Should voters be worried about your ability to work with the governor directly?
So there are 15 people on the board of RTD, and quite honestly, it's not the responsibility of every member of the board to work with the governor's office. It's the responsibility of the chair of the board. It's the responsibility of the executive committee. We want RTD negotiating as one entity, not 15 board members. I've known Jared since I moved to Colorado, actually before I moved to Colorado. And he and I have been very friendly. He's been a phenomenal champion of housing politics and pro-growth here in Colorado. And that is probably, aside from transit, the number one thing that I have cared about in my political life. We disagreed on this piece of legislation. We disagreed pretty strongly. And if there's one thing people know about me in politics is that I don't do anything with half measures. I thought the bill was very, very bad, and I did everything I could to kill it. I have a feeling that when all of this is over, we'll get along just fine.
Kyle? You entered the race shortly after this whole brouhaha with Chris and the governor.
Yep.
You have close ties with the governor's office. What would you tell a voter who's concerned that you are only running for the board to do Polis's bidding?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And so I think that, to clarify, nobody asked me to get into this race. I did this because I had experience in the field. I think when it comes to someone who has built transit-oriented communities, worked with several agencies in a collaborative space, I think you have a singular choice up here. And that's what I'm bringing to this campaign and trying to, tell the voters about, right? So I have worked with about a half dozen other transit agencies, and the best examples of the work that I've been able to achieve there is in building coalitions, collaborating, having a healthy working environment where it's, and I think what's lost here is that oversight does not have to be aggressive and adversarial. I think it could be a collaborative space. I think that when it comes to governing, it's important to create a tone and a space for that type of growth. And I think that Having built, as I mentioned, transit and transit-oriented communities with coalitions of the business community, transit agencies, elected officials, environmental groups. That's what I want to bring here. And I'm not coming into this with any enemies or preconditions. I'm coming into this with experience, technical know-how, and a passion for it. My son's here tonight. We chose to raise our family here in Denver. And we are doing this because we know how high the stakes are. We know this is about our climate, and we know this is about his future and building a transit system that is going to be successful for 40, decades to come. And that's going to take coalitions of people that have.
That's 2 minutes, Kyle. Thank you.
Thank you so
I am
much.
going to ask you a follow-up question,
Yeah.
because I just don't know much about you. I'll ask Chris and Bob you as well when it comes up. You mentioned you've built transit projects and transit-oriented communities before.
Right.
Give us an example of a transit project you built, what your role was.
100%. Yeah. So as a public opinion researcher, I worked with several different transit agencies to understand the needs of the community, build a strategic plan, and then execute a vision. And Measure W in San Mateo County was one where we raised, and I'm not going to get the dollar number right, but it was over $1 billion. For roads and bus rapid transit and helping Samtrans and BART. We took that campaign from start to finish. So we were able to understand what are the different components that we're going to need to include in this, how we're going to build a ballot measure, how we're going to build a coalition to execute this, and then we ran a campaign to do that as well. Also worked with, how much time do I?
I wasn't timing you. I think
Okay.
that's plenty, though. I got a sense of it, though. I think we should move on.
So there's a couple other examples I'd love to get, but I understand we
That
should
was a
move
great
on.
one. We'll talk
Thank
later.
you so much.
Bob, so you're a guy from the community. You're someone that's worked directly for RTD, and you're stepping into this political world. Would you be an ally of Governor Polis or a rival?
Well, let me straighten a couple things out there. First of all, I did not work directly for RTD. I worked for Transdev. Most people don't know Transdev is a contractor based in Paris, France, owned by a private equity firm that handles roughly 50% of the bus routes in Colorado. When RTD first started contracting out bus services, it was a competitive bid. Transdev, a year or so ago, purchased its largest global competitor. Also, I would take issue with the statement that Chris led the charge with regard to opposition to the Transit Reform Act. I know that he led the scorecard with regard to Colorado Open Records Act requests of legislators, which didn't exactly endear him to the Transportation Committee. But my interest in this race and my focus on going forward, you asked me about would I be an ally of the governor. I'll definitely work with someone that's willing to work together. But I do not necessarily like the idea of the billionaire wagging the big tail. I think it's important for the little guy to have a voice.
That's great. We're going to move on to something a little bit different. This is a little curveball for you three. Yeah, Chris, do you want to respond to something?
He mentioned me. Can I respond very quickly?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Great.
quickly.
Just wanted to say two things. First off, I very much intended to say helped lead the charge. There were incredible people, Ian Thomas DeFoya on that, Fofi Mendez, you, and a number of others who were part of that coalition and made it happen. This was not something that I just slammed myself into the breach. The second thing is that
Actually, it was Bree that said it.
so my
Noted.
apologies.
Your second point, Chris.
Yes. I will never apologize for wanting to get information out of public officials. We didn't know who was in the room, who was at the table in that fight. By getting those public records, we were able to tell that communities of color were completely absent from the stakeholder meetings on those records. And it's because I made those records requests, and I'm very happy that we did so.
Love a good FOIA. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. For these next three questions, I want a show of hands. All right. So number one of RTD board's main responsibilities is overseeing the CEO, Deborah Johnson, who has been in hot water recently. You all might have read about some of this. She's been avoiding questions from the press, including about her mysterious firing of RTD's police chief. Please raise your hand if and when you're elected, you would be a vote to remove her as CEO. All right, noted. No hands.
No hands.
No hands. Number two, a lot of Denverites are nostalgic for the old streetcar system. Would you support RTD rebuilding the streetcar lines?
I would love it.
2 hands. All three supportive. Kind of a surprise there. So next one, some Denverites worry about RTD changing too much and losing access to their bus to work. Is there ever a circumstance in which you would support shutting down a bus line? All right, we got Chris and we got Kyle with hands up. Bob, no.
Do either of you want to elaborate on why you would support shutting down a bus line?
Yeah, I think as communities grow, as places change, you do have to reevaluate. I think RTD has is an optimization plan that they look at data, they look at metrics, they look at density, they look at ridership, and they try to understand the needs of the community. And I think that's a critical part of how we best serve the community is understanding, what is the best footprint for a bus line or that we're going to be, servicing. And how can we best service that? I think it always there is a battle between coverage and frequency. So you have to determine what are going to be the highest used lines. I don't think you're ever going to shut down the 15. It's like 20,000 people a day. But there potential exists that there are lines out there that are just not being used. So I think it's fair to say that we could shut some down.
Chris?
Yeah, so RTD spends a dramatically different amount of money subsidizing some lines versus others. For the 15, for the 0, for the FF, we're talking single dollars per rider. For some of the locals, it can go up into the tens and even $20 per rider. My goal is to maximize the amount of ridership that we have and to reduce the wasteful spending that RTD has on routes that aren't performing well. I think the goal should be to run service where people are going to use it. There are absolutely concerns about equity and about coverage to make sure that this is a network that is effective. But at the end of the day, if more people are using it, then that means more people are getting benefit out of it. And that is the metric we should be going for.
Okay.
Before we move on, I'm going to do a quick fact check on you there, Kyle. You said they're never going to shut down the 15. I believe they are actually currently planning to because it's going to be replaced by the Colfax BRT.
You got me.
Yeah.
You got me. And they're expanding it, right? It's going to be even bigger and better.
Not RTD, though. Bree?
Paul's just being Paul.
I mean, RTD is going to run the line.
Well, that's
it's
a fair
He's right. RTD is going to run the line, but it's going to be
a CDOT project.
City of Denver. Let's move on.
It is all three.
Accessibility.
It's all three.
We'll check. We'll drop in on the podcast. Bree, why don't you go on?
Yeah. So
Excuse
Bob,
me.
yeah, go right ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't.
You didn't raise your hand.
Right, but I do have a take on
Sure.
this. I really believe that what needs to happen is these 40-passenger buses that roll around town with 6 or 7 or 8 passengers those routes need to be looked at with a mind towards possibly substituting what I call right-sizing the vehicles. Maybe putting 16-passenger vans with wheelchair lifts and offering more frequent service on those routes. Paint the streets with service is what I'd like to see. I want more, not less.
Well, I'm glad you brought up accessibility because that goes into our next question. There are concerns from the disability community that the newer rideshare service that RTD has been running will get shut down because it's too expensive. This is the ride on demand, not Access-a-Ride. But I've also talked to some of my friends who use wheelchairs and are RTD riders as well, who say even that particular service, the rideshare service, doesn't accommodate or serve them. But Access-a-Ride is also can be slow and unreliable. The disability community is disproportionately affected by public transit. They rely more on public transit. I'd love to hear from all of you if you have plans or thoughts on increasing accessibility for riders with disabilities. Bob, you want to go?
Yeah. So I love Jamie Lewis's take on this. He's like, we've got a successful program. People are using the hell out of it, and they want to shut it down. What's up with that? You know, I think, like I say, more, not less.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a phenomenally complicated issue. There are multiple questions around equity at play because, you know, obviously the access ride services that service individuals in wheelchairs, which the access on demand services, which are basically subsidized Uber, don't do as well, are significantly expensive. Which is why access on demand was brought into place. But as it turns out, there are a lot of people who benefit from getting an Uber rather than being, you know, having to take public transit. And so we've seen usage of that service explode. There are also a lot of people who would benefit from it who don't know about it, haven't signed up for it, don't have the ability to, you know it exists and any of that. And so, you know, I start to think about, you know, we're spending $1 million a month on access on demand. 70% of the money for that goes to 30% of the individuals using that. When you do the math out, which I did, it comes out to a little over $1,000 a month per high usage rider in subsidy. I want to be able to go to my community, to the people who are elderly, the people who are 70 and 80 and 90 years old, and say, we are using accessibility services in a responsible, fair way that you're going to feel like you're getting a good use of taxpayer money. I also want to be able to go to my friends who are, you know, seriously wheelchair bound, who are blind, and be able to say, you have a successful way to get around. Those aren't easy questions to answer. I like that RTD is doing a peer review right now to get a better sense of how other agencies deal with this. But those are the sensibilities and the questions that I'm asking as we're going through this.
Kyle, what about you? Increasing
absolutely.
accessibility.
I think the report that came out kind of noted that access on demand is not sustainable at the current rate. As Chris mentioned, it's expensive, and it's not. There's no base rate involved with that too. So there's definitely some ways, but also you look at accessible ride, and it is unfortunately not the best option for people getting around. I mean, sometimes I've heard stories of people, you can't schedule it day of. You have to do it in advance. Sometimes people get picked up, and they'll pick up 3 other people, end up taking 3 hours to get what should have been maybe a 20-minute ride. So there's definitely there are better ways to do this, right? And I think we need to look at other communities and figure out what's the best suited match for us here. I think there's also some issues with accessibility when it comes to just the services that we have already. There's issues with grade and issues with accessibility of wheelchairs getting on buses. I think in other communities we have San Francisco. I mean, there are areas where it is easier for a person to get on than I've seen it accessible here. And just, as somebody who drove a stroller around the city for, months at a time, trying to, get around, our sidewalks are rough, our bus stops are not great, and there's a lot of issues with our infrastructure that we need to look at to improve those. It's not all on RTD to figure that out, but I think we have to provide this service. We have to do a better job. I don't think getting rid of the program is the right move. I think we need to figure out how we can, look for merging of the programs, how we can look for other sources of funding, and how we can improve accessibility and the independence that we're promised and mandated to do as RTD as well.
Yes, Bob.
One last point on that. Before we look at cuts to service, especially to this community, I would like to look at the potential for cuts to middle management. I think we need to look at the salaries, and we need to understand those things are not exact. RTD doesn't release an org chart. RTD doesn't have a COO right now. It doesn't have a CTO. Hasn't for 15 months. How are we going to measure it? How are we going to manage it if we can't measure it?
How'd y'all get here tonight?
Good question.
Chris?
Bob and I both live pretty proximate to the studio, so I'm pretty sure he walked, and I certainly did. So.
Is that true, Bob? You walk?
I walked, yeah. I'm kind of like the character in Toy Story 2, you know, that crosses the street to go to work, but he drove. I walked.
All right, Kyle, how about you?
It's kind of a bummer of an answer, but our e-bikes were just stolen, so we had to drive. Our toddler, needs to be in a car seat, so we tend to take him around in that. I'd love to be able to maximize his time, maximize our time, and ensure, have RTD to be the best choice. But the stop closest to us only runs every half an hour, and with bedtimes and nap times and all the things that you have to do in life, it's just not the best choice for us. And I think we've had to make other decisions with that. Case in point, we moved because it was a longer bus ride than a walk for my wife to get to work. So we made decisions based on, RTD falling short for us, unfortunately.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Thank you. One of the things, as someone who's taken 300 RTD trips this year and thousands over the last 7, we have on a regular basis toddlers on the RTD buses. It's not ideal. We don't have car seats. You don't need them as much as you do in a regular passenger vehicle. But I mean, I used to ride the 83L with a mom who had to take her kids, who were about the same age as your son, 2 boys, to daycare, and who didn't have a car. And so this was the only way at 8 o'clock in the morning every day. I want to make RTD the kind of place where everyone feels comfortable bringing their kids, because there are a lot of people in the city who do not make enough money to own an e-bike. They do not make enough money to own a car. And unless we can make RTD safe enough and comfortable enough that Kyle is willing to bring his toddler on the bus, then we're letting those people down who have no other choice.
We ride the bus, my son and I, and my wife. It's something we do regularly. It's not the best choice because it's not rapid and frequent enough for us to be able to maximize our time and for him to have fun at this event. So I appreciate the ability to follow up on that, though.
Let's take a look at RTD itself and the decisions that the organization has made over the last decade. Is there a specific policy or decision that RTD has made or implemented in the last decade that you would have done differently, and why? Bob?
Oh,
Bob, you're in the hot seat.
yeah, well, so I seem to remember the year 2020, maybe it was March, something called COVID. There were a lot of decisions made at that point. Got so many decisions that RTD makes that are placing the frontline personnel in the position of being the hall monitor, the classroom cop, the bartender, the psychologist. I could go on. There's unfortunately, management has an attitude towards the people that are providing the services that if something goes wrong, it's like the opposite of the customer is always right, the employee is always wrong.
Chris, what about you? Is there something that RTD has done in the last decade that you would do differently?
I'll give you 2. The first one actually hems back to what Bob said about the pandemic. When RTD saw a massive drop in ridership, it let go of a substantial number of its operators, despite having the unions, ATU 1001 and others, want to work with them to make sure they could retain those operators.
Recall that.
While funding was being worked out. At the last minute, not the last minute, but then money came through, unsurprisingly, from the federal government, and then RTD had to start bringing back all of the people. And so that choice right then to overreact and not retain its people is one of the reasons why we have the operator shortage we do today. I learned about this from talking with the leaders of ATU 1001, with whom I formed a pretty close relationship, about what the process was like back then. And I apologize, Lance, if I got any of that wrong. The second thing I'll say is RTD purchased new fair payment technology 2 years ago now with tap to pay. If you go to an RTD stop, you can tap your RTD debit card. You can scan a barcode. You cannot, however, tap your credit card. You can do that in Las Vegas, which uses the exact same platform, because Las Vegas pursued credit card tap at the same time they rolled out their hardware. We chose not to. And I have been advocating and pushing and trying to do everything I can to get RTD to move on implementing credit card tap to pay as soon as humanly possible. And it's something I'm going to pursue really hard on the board, and it should have been done 2 years ago.
Kyle?
Yeah, no, I think for me, the biggest focus is kind of the lack of perspective on the climate and the choices that they've made that have impacted that. And I think there's a couple of different areas that we can look at there. And I think the federal government tried to get electrification going for RTD, and it kind of fell apart. And I think that was something that that decision and that inability to pursue that was a big issue for me. And I think the second thing is to echo, I think the pandemic provided opportunities for great failures, unfortunately, because we cut service, let go operators, and then when commuters were coming back, there was no service, and it's still not back. And so people are making decisions for themselves based on the unreliability, slow and infrequent service that is now the standard, and they're making decisions for the climate that are impacting our health and our air here in the city. And so I'd like to see a bigger focus on improving ridership through fixing making it more reliable, frequent, and rapid. And that's, hopefully that we're going to see that through BRT, but that wasn't RTD pushing the needle on that. That was the city and the state. And we have great partners now in the state and many of the communities out there who are looking for a partner in RTD. And I think that we have a huge opportunity right now to right some of those wrongs and mistakes that we've made, and that's why I'm running. Yeah.
I kind of want to hear from the audience. Are you ready?
That sounds great.
I'm
I'd
ready
love
to hear
hear
some of
from
your
you all.
questions. Does anyone have any questions? We got our producer Olivia here who's going to bring around a microphone.
Oh, mutual love, everybody.
I see a whole bunch of hands shooting up, Olivia.
All right, I'll go to the easiest to access. Oh, it went off. Hello.
You're good.
Hi, I am curious what you all think here, especially you, Kyle. You talk about all this improving frequency, all that. Where are you going to pull the money out of the hat to just hire more drivers, get them on the road, improve these frequencies? And how are you going to decide which corridors to prioritize? And I guess what would be a good headway time? What would you say is good frequency?
That's a great question. What was your name again?
My name's Eris.
Thanks, Eris.
So
go ahead, Kyle.
couple of questions. So funding and what? Sorry, it was headway.
Prioritization.
And prioritization. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Okay, let's start with funding. Look, I think, like I just mentioned, we have great partnerships with the state, and we've seen the ability for the federal government to step in as well. I think RTD's funding mechanisms right now are not sustainable. We're not capturing enough at the fare box, and the sales tax is clearly not covering what it needs to for us to maintain, improve, and expand the services in a meaningful way. So I think we have to start by improving ridership before we can go back to voters and ask that question. But I think when it comes to what the board can do to guide a policy is set, for improving ridership, is set policies that are data driven and focused on metrics and goals in a way that helps the agency achieve its goals, right? So we as a board have to create a collaborative space with good oversight, good audit, and then set goals for the agency that allow them to achieve those goals, not micromanage them, but like create a good space for them to be able to execute. And so I think that comes back to prioritization too, right? Like we have to set those metrics in a meaningful way. Are we connecting dense communities that have the ability to improve ridership? Are we connecting transit-oriented spaces that are, populations that are interested in riding transit? As I mentioned earlier, this is a balance between coverage and frequency, and I think we're going to have to make some hard decisions when it comes to encouraging better metrics and a system optimization plan in order to meet those goals.
That's great. Let's get another question here. Olivia, how about just right next to you? Really close. And what is your name, and go ahead with your question.
Hi, my name is Abe. And I was just, question I had was, so taking the bus, it seems the bus ends pretty early at night, I think, especially on the weekends. And, a lot of times I'm downtown and might have to Uber back or try to figure out a way back because the buses stopped running. And I'm just wondering, is that something you all try to make a priority to increase and try to get more frequency out there? Because I think a lot of people might take the bus back. I mean, even if it is like late at night, just to get back to where they need to get to. So I'm just hoping that's something you guys will focus on if you do get elected.
I'll grab this one.
I'm not sure I heard a question there, but buses late at night,
sure.
Chris?
So, I mean, I've been stranded by the 15 coming home from Charlie's at like 1:45 in the morning. I actually left early to try and catch the bus home, and it just didn't show up, and that was basically the end of the runs for the night. You would think that on one of the more busy streets where bars let out at 2 a.m., that RTD would run buses at 2:15, 2:20, 2:30, something like that. They don't. And I'm willing to bet that if there was a run around that time, it would be pretty popular. So I completely agree with you. I think building up trust so that people know I'm going to go out to the bars. I can take the 15 home. I can stay out and have a good time, and I don't need to worry about making sure that my friend is going to be able to take me back home. We've all been there, I think. And so, I think we need to look at 24-hour service on our most popular lines, on the A line, on the 15, on the 0, even on the FF. I think it sends a message that if you can run every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day on the stuff people know they need to use, they know they like, people will trust it more, people will use it more.
Anyone else? Wow, lots of questions. Lots of questions.
Olivia's going all the way to the top.
I'm Lloyd Dixon, and excuse me. I'm a former driver, and I hear everyone say they want more service, more frequent service. The problem is the days are long enough for the driver as there is. We have driver retainer problems. First of all, the pay's not worth a 13-hour day from home. That's what they normally put up with. And right now, I'm not working for other reasons. But I agree, we do need the more service. I've thought about it. There are issues with managing the schedules. I know it's supposed to be a question.
Yeah, right? I would like you to get to the question.
I know it's supposed to be a question. Okay, my question is, what do you suggest? I've heard all of this stuff about management and corporations, but when it comes to right down to it, the driver retainability and sustainability, what are you planning to do or confirm about keeping drivers, making it worthwhile for them to stay on there so you can have that every 15-minute shift? Anyone can answer that.
Sure.
Bob, why don't you take that one?
Thank you, and thanks, Roy. Great question. And a big concern. I understand that the job fairs that RTD is conducting for operators, at those job fairs, they're telling candidates you can make $100,000 a year driving a bus, and that is including overtime, which now is double time, right? But when you get into the reality of it, it's a very stressful, exhausting job. You and I both know that what a bus operator does on their day off, more often than not, is sleep. So what I would say is we need to take a page out of what the dock workers have just done, what the UAW has done, and we need to pay people more than enough to cover their bills so they can put away a little bit of rainy day money. And that means starting out at $40 an hour. I'm sorry, $26, $27 an hour to start, $13.50 a month for rent. Forget it. You can't retain people. It's unsustainable. So let's get real about that. And I know that sounds outlandish, and I know we're going to hear from, folks that will say that that's unrealistic, but I'm sorry, it's unrealistic to think that this is a sustainable situation. It's why we haven't been able to hang on to the operators.
Can I jump in on this one quickly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, quickly. You can have a minute.
So I'm proud to be endorsed by ATU 1001, the RTD bus operators union. And I've built a pretty close relationship with them because I'm someone who comes from a strong labor background and a really firm believer that we need to provide for workers. And the reason that that's important here is that working conditions are one of the key drivers of why people choose right now to leave and go work for UPS, where they're not going to get spit on and they're not going to get asked to take a bathroom break measured in seconds. And they're not going to get treated differently than RTD treats its management. And so, I've said repeatedly on the campaign trail that where I want to get to is that someone making the same amount of money in management and making the same amount of money as an operator feels like they get the same working conditions. And right now, that is not remotely the case. Operators and mechanics are not treated as well as the folks who work in management.
So what do you think the starting pay should be?
That's a phenomenally complicated question. I think we need to work hard with the unions to ensure that we're offering a competitive pay package.
Would you put a number on it, Chris? Bob, you said 40, right?
That's right.
Chris?
Because of the complexities around
Chris?
overtime pay. No, I mean more than
Kyle,
we have
do you want to
now.
put a number on it?
Yeah.
What starting pay would you say for drivers?
Prevailing wage. I mean, it's important for labor to working people to feel like they've earned a good salary. I'll jump on $40 an hour. I think. Look, if we can make a sustainable, improving ridership program out of that, that's fantastic, right? If we can turn $40 an hour into better service for the public, and we can capture more fares, we can encourage better funding streams down the line to be able to support that, then of course I'm going to jump on board, because I believe in labor, and I believe that we should support the request. And if that's the request of the union, then I'm happy to jump onto that.
Okay, that's great. Let's go to another. We got a lot of questions up here.
Okay.
We got a lot of good
All right.
questions coming here.
Thank you. My name is Sarah. I grew up taking the 44 and the 121 out of Montbello. And I work here, and I could easily take the H line, just a quick walk over, and then take it all the way over to 9 Mile, which is where I live. And it would be really, really convenient, except the zones are so confusing. So when I go to pay, I have to figure out how much to pay. And then I don't feel safe. I've taken it a couple of times. So Kyle, what would you do to make it so a single young woman, or anybody here for that matter, can be on the trains and on the buses in the city and not have to be exposed to drugs and folks with mental health issues and the thought of being robbed? Because it's for my own safety, I'm going to get in my car and drive down.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I'm sorry that you don't feel safe in transit. That's not a great place to be. I think, for context, I worked with the ACLU on use of force and de-escalation policies, and I've also worked with law enforcement departments on de-escalation as well. So I've helped write these plans for agencies before, and I've also worked with transit agencies when it comes to keeping kids out of the education to to jail pipeline, but that out of context here, I think, and to approach your first question or statement about being confused, I think the first level of intervention that we can use here is the ambassadors program, which RTD has a pilot program now, and it's kind of like a customer service and safety program that would come in and help people understand the routes and provide a presence that's going to encourage safety as well. Second tier in that, I think, Denver STAR programs are a fantastic way to have a civilian emergency intervention in nonviolent situations. I'd love to see something like that with RTD. And then, finally, we need to work with law enforcement to de-escalate any violent situation as well. So, and in my experience in writing these plans for agencies in the past, it's like you have to have a tiered approach. You have to be focused on public safety and customer service, not just law enforcement and busting people off of trains.
All right, let's get another question. Yeah, that's who I was thinking too, Olivia. That's great. What's your name?
My name's Jenica. And I think something that's very interesting about District A is it encapsulates a lot of the problems of RTD, which is, in part, it has some of the most popular routes. It's got things like the Mall Ride and the A Line. It also has a huge swath of folks who would have a hour-plus walk to get to their nearest major transit center. RTD is clearly designed to get folks from the suburbs into the middle of the city, but doesn't really connect the city within itself very well. How would you address that problem, which I think would significantly impact readership?
Anyone in particular you want to take that?
Chris seems to want to take it, so.
It's all yours, Chris.
I think I probably do use RTD in District A more than my competitors. I'll first start off by saying that while the A line is near District A, it's actually just outside because it's up at Union Station, which isn't included in District A, though a lot of us use it. The lines that go through RTD the lines that go through District A are interesting. They run from a sort of wealthy urban downtown through a wealthier suburban sort of center of the city out to one of the more low-income communities that we have out in Aurora. So you end up with like the 6 and the 15 and the 10 and a number of other lines getting used by folks who don't look like the communities that the lines are running through. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember when we're talking about transit in District A, because it's not like routes just serve the people that where the bus stops are. They're often, like you said, trying to get to work from places that are farther away. I think that we need to look at additional transfers so that it's easier to get up and down to other parts of the district. The 40 is good on Colorado. The BRT there will be extremely helpful in facilitating that, but there's not the greatest north-south service through District A. And then improving the frequency on the most widely used routes that go east-west down there. There are some routes, I cannot remember the number off the top of my head, but we did an analysis that looked at like what ridership is compared to frequency, and there are some east-west routes along the bottom of District A that get really high ridership relative to the number of buses that run. I think we need to start having a conversation about making sure that the routes that people want down there are getting the service that they deserve.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, Kyle, you want to respond?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we moved because we were having the same problem that we're talking about, right? It took us longer to ride the bus than to walk to work. And I think, when we think about the perspective of the board and how they would guide this, I think we need to look at how we work with communities and how, and take the model of BRT on Colfax and Federal and Colorado, and establish prioritization of transit, right? Like I think the line right by my house, the 10 is a great example of this. The 10 runs into a stop sign like every 3 seconds. But you go up 2 blocks and you have, 13th Avenue and it's a straight shot. It would run so much faster on that road, but we prioritize vehicles over cars. And cars over transit in so many different spaces. So we have to look at more dedicated space, more prioritization, if we're going to, make transit first and make it the best choice.
All right, I think we got time for one more question. Bree, you want to?
I'd love to hear the woman who uses a wheelchair, if we could.
Well, I have two. One's a hands up or down. How many of you are working on 7A actively supporting it?
What's 7A? I don't know. Maybe
Tell
some of
us.
the people in the audience don't either.
7A is the ballot initiative without raising taxes to let RTD continue to keep the revenue that they're getting from sales taxes, which would be impossible to refund, by the way, anyway. But if it doesn't pass, then RTD is going to lose more money and have to make further service cuts. So,
okay. So
vote yes
how
on
many
7A.
hands? How many hands do we see for that? Yeah. All three hands.
Great.
All three hands. And what was your other question?
My other question is, what would you do to bring more community voices to the table, both those of us that use transit and don't have the option to take a car or move or whatever, as well as those who have choices, who we do need to get on those buses? How would you bring more of the diverse voices into the management of RTD?
Can I jump in on that quickly?
Are you okay with that if Chris takes that one first? Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Show up. I've been running for a year now, and I've attended a couple hundred events in that time. I go to literally everything. I was at the Colorado Black Women for Political Action luncheon, where I was honored with their endorsement, but I've been going to that and their events for years. I go to the Democratic political events across the district. I go to the launch for 7A. Bob and I were there. Kyle wasn't. I think that, you have a responsibility to talk to people, to meet with people, to be in the spaces where change is being made. And if you're just going to get in and decide, oh, I'll go to the meetings, or in Kyle's case, not even go to the meetings, I think that people should ask a question about whether or not you really care about community, or whether or not you're just running because you think it's interesting. I believe in showing up. I believe in giving my card out, sitting down with whoever wants to sit down with me, and I'll keep doing that if I'm elected.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Chris, I have to say you are the first and only full-time transit rider I've ever met in my life. What is the pay for that position? And how do you afford it?
I'm not sure what he means by that. I don't have a car. I haven't for 7 years.
That was a
I
choice,
use transit
though, right?
to get around.
You're not transit dependent.
I get anxious, significantly so, when I drive. It is uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable, for me to be behind the wheel. And so after having put up with that for more than 10 years in California, it was a hard choice. I said, I'm going to try to make do with this for 6 months when I first moved to Colorado, and then 6 more months, and then 6 more months, and I managed to do it. So, no, I would love to have the same comfort that most people do.
Did you ever think about getting a
ride.
chauffeur?
Oh,
God. Let him
I'm
finish,
not
Bob.
wealthy, Bob. I certainly can't afford a chauffeur.
Kyle, did you?
Chris said you've never been to any
Yeah, I
meetings.
was
So you've
like-
been to any meetings?
He was, yeah.
I'd love to just respond to the question if that's okay. Too. That's
Sure.
great. I'm not gonna give the personal attacks the time of day. I think what we can learn to respond to the question and talk about what we would do to include community voices and encourage coalitions, I think was where we were starting with that. So in my perspective, as somebody who was has been a community organizer for 20 years and ran campaigns and also was in public opinion research, where it was literally my job to listen to hundreds of thousands of voices and understand their needs and make policies better for them. I bring that experience to the table, building those coalitions, reaching out to the community, and just listening. I think an active listening is the best policy here. And I think if we pull that back into the perspective of RTD, and that's having better communication. That's better communication about line closures and slowdowns, and that's better communication about what's going on in RTD. And that's going to start with improving the tone, right? It's going to start with having better conversations on the RTD board. It's going to have better conversations with the GM, and then including members of the community. We have an awesome advocacy community when in transit and environmentalism, and accessibility, and beyond. And it's those coalitions that are going to build transit of the future. I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to do it listening and encouraging a healthy environment for growth.
All right, we're going to finish up here. Each of you will be able to make a closing statement. We're going to do the too long didn't read version. Try to keep it under a minute. Bob, do you want to start with your closing statement?
Wait a second. I'm sorry. This is our closing statement that was 3 minutes, or this is different?
Yeah, we're shifting it down. We feel like we've gotten plenty of forum here, and we want to do nice, concise
wanted to tell a story,
closing statements.
A real-world story about being out on a bus.
You got 1 minute for your closing statement, Bob.
Okay. I can't tell the story. I'll say this. My name is Bob Diniger. I have no qualms about being a pain in the ass when the situation calls for it. And this may be one of those situations. There's a lot of opportunities for kindness operating an RTD bus. You see a lot of kindness being demonstrated, and you see some cruelty. I think we need a vision for what we want. We need a political will. I understand that Toronto, in the most densely populated section of Toronto, is 400,000 people. 78% of the population are using active transportation, be it rolling or strolling or public transit. We need that vision writ large across the district, but most especially in District A, which is Denver and Glendale. It's just a wonderful opportunity to be a global leader for active transportation, public transportation, and healthy living.
Thank you, Bob. Chris, how about you?
So I take support for organized labor as an article of faith. And when we addressed the question earlier about compensation, for me, a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, where the head of ATU can look at me and say, you did right by us. That's the kind of compensation structure that I want RTD to provide and that I want the board to approve. I'm running as the only person who actually relies on transit for the board. And there's only one other person on the board who is like me, Michael Guzman. We need more people on the RTD board who know what it's like to be an RTD rider. I've been able to bring together people from across the political spectrum and across the area to agree on a joint plan to fix the key issues inside of RTD's existing budget. I think the biggest question you have to ask if you're listening to this is simply, who do you think is going to most be able to help turn the ship around at RTD? Who is going to be able to help fix it? Who is the most dedicated candidate that is going to put in the work necessary to build the relationships, build bridges with elected officials like Mayor Mike Johnston, who is endorsing me, like ATU, like SEIU, to create an agency we can all be proud of? My name's Chris Nicholson. My number is 303-335-9728. And I'll be there for them, and I'll be there for you as well. So please get in touch. And
Thank you,
I hope
Chris.
to earn your vote.
Thank you, Chris. Kyle, your closing statement?
Yeah, of course. Thank you to our moderators, everyone listening, and my fellow candidates. Help voters are well served with information to help them make a choice on Election Day. Making a choice for me is not only someone with budgeting and oversight experience, technical and data analysis experience, communication and human behavior research experience, lawmaking and government financing experience, coalition building and community organizing experience, but also a choice for someone who has gone further than activism by taking action to build transit and transit-oriented communities and protect our environment. I understand government and policy making, and I have the skills to deliver a better RTD. I know what turning around RTD is going to be hard. One of the hardest things I've had to do was help my toddler use an inhaler and try to explain to him why he's having trouble breathing. Our air quality in Denver is the 6th worst in the nation, and inhalers help, but they are not a long-term solution for our climate future. We need trees and trains and buses, and every single toddler I've surveyed agrees. Hopefully, we can get some voting age folks on board as well. Our future requires leaders who will build coalitions, make strategic assessments, and execute a vision. We chose to raise our family here in Denver and know how high the stakes are for our quality of life and our climate. I'm running because I believe we can improve lives and our environment with a better RTD. As I mentioned, my name is Kyle, rhymes with mile, and I would appreciate your vote on November 5th. I would be honored if voters gave me the opportunity to take action and help us all breathe a little easier.
All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the Denver Press Club as well for organizing this.
Chris Nicholson, Bob Diniger, Kyle Bruner, thank you all for coming out.